Hey guys, just a reminder, my online course is Birth Story Academy, and you can enroll in it at birthstory.com. It's taught by me. You can be in your jammies. It's online. It's pre-recorded, and it has a ton of freebies and downloads. It's everything that you need to prepare for your hospital birth. So hope to see you in Birth Story Academy. Hey, thanks so much for being here. Today's an interesting episode. I'm interviewing Cora Howard. She's the founder behind the coaching program Right to Heal. It's a mindfulness-based coaching program for those who have had cesarean sections and that are looking to heal. So she had a primary and a secondary cesarean section. She talks about those stories, and she talks about what kind of the triggers and why she suffered from postpartum depression. And we talk about C-section recovery and emotional resilience, postpartum mindfulness practices. And it's just a sweet little episode about somebody in Alabama who took an experience that was really hard for her with 2 cesarean sections and made a beautiful coaching program, Right to Heal, to help others with their postpartum journey and their postpartum recovery after a cesarean section. So I really hope that you like this episode, and I would love it if you would share it with one of your friends or family members that you know that has had a cesarean section, even if it's been 10 or 20 years. We always can heal. What does a contraction feel like? How do I know if I'm in labor? And what does a day of labor look like? Wait, is this normal? Hey, I'm Heidi. My best friends call me Hides. I'm a certified birth doula, host of this podcast, and author of Birth Story, an interactive pregnancy guidebook. I have supported hundreds of women through their labor and deliveries, and I believe every one of them and you deserves a microphone and a stage. So here we are. Listen each week to get answers to these tough questions. Birth Story, where we talk about pregnancy, labor, deliveries, where we tell our stories and share our feelings. And of course, chat about our favorite baby products and motherhood. And because I'm passionate about birth outcomes, you will hear from some of the top experts in labor and delivery. Whether you are pregnant, trying desperately to get pregnant, or you just love a good birth story, I hope you will stick around and be part of this Birth Story family. Hey, Cora, welcome to the Birth Story podcast.
Thanks. Thank you for having me.
As you guys heard in the intro, today we're going to be talking about 2 primary cesarean sections and the Right to Heal, Cora's business. And we're going to be talking about what led her into this work. So thanks for being here today, Cora.
Thank you for having me.
So where do you live? Where are you coming to us from? I know we're on Zoom, but where do you reside in the world?
I live in Southern Alabama. I call it a utopia. It's called Fairhope. It's a small little town that sits off the coast of Mobile Bay. I am Miss Cora, obviously. And by trade, I'm a mindfulness practitioner, but I'm also like a C-section emotional coach. That's basically what I do. And I got led into it because of my own personal journey from having C-sections and recovering emotionally and mentally and coming up with my own kind of unique approach to overcoming it.
Okay, because you're the first person, and I am deep in the trenches of birth world. Okay. And you're the
Hmm.
first person that I have ever been in contact with that tells me that they do cesarean recovery healing mindfulness coaching. So do people come to you before they have a cesarean section, or do they find you mostly after they've had a cesarean section and emotionally looking to heal from that experience, or both?
I haven't had anyone approach me prior to a C-section, but it's normally afterwards, and it's not just during the postpartum stage. Sometimes it's like years later because they still have those emotions and those traumatic events, and they're kind of playing out in their life, causing them not to get promoted, causing them, not to leave the job, causing them to not live life the way they want to live life.
Mm-hmm. People who have listened to my podcast for a long time, as a birth doula, I do not have a coaching business, but with my private clients, I do a completing the birth ceremony. And it's kind of like a vision and mindfulness that we do just to like kind of close the past story and like open opportunities for their next birth story. If they've hired me as their birth doula and they've had a previous cesarean section and are looking to have a vaginal birth after a cesarean section. So I'm so curious for this conversation today because I'm like, what in the world is Cora doing? And I would love to refer some people to you. I think it is interesting that you said it's mostly afterwards because I have found that a lot of people who have scheduled cesarean sections have different experiences than those who may have labored for 40 or 50 hours and then ended in the operating room with no prior heads up that that was going to happen. So, yeah, I want to talk a little bit about that today. So, tell me, how old are your kids?
My girls are 7 and 5.
7 and 5. Woo! You are in it. At least they're both, do you homeschool or are they off to school during the day?
They're off to school during the day.
Okay. It's game changing when they turn 5, you guys, and they can go to school. You do get a little bit of time back. And then we do things like launch businesses and become entrepreneurs.
Right.
So tell me about you. What I do know about Cora is that these were scheduled cesarean sections. So tell me a little bit about your pregnancy and why in a first pregnancy you were facing a scheduled cesarean section.
So at 30, I want to say 30, 31 weeks, they found out that my oldest was breached. So he couldn't turn her. And I really forget why. I think I just kind of stopped listening after that. But he's like, don't get on Google, don't Google. And I did, I Googled and I went on Reddit and I got freaked out. But he went through the whole C-section. I asked, all my questions. They came with like a paper written all of questions, and I asked a whole bunch of questions. And then I found a couple of people who've had C-sections kind of tell me like what they went through. So I was going in prepared for like just physical things, if I'm reflecting correctly. But my water broke at 37 weeks, 2 days. And I only remember that because both of them happened at 37 weeks, 2 days.
That is so interesting. So you had scheduled a cesarean section due to a breech presenting baby. And then your body
Yes.
decided, hey, we're going to go into labor on our own. But for this audience, this is education through storytelling is the Birth Story podcast. So I have to pause for just a minute because it is very normal for a baby to be breech at 30 and 31 weeks and 32 and 34 and 35. The only time people start going, maybe we should do something called an external cephalic version where they try to manually rotate the baby from the outside is when you get closer to 36 or 37 weeks. So from a doula perspective and being in birth work for 21 years, just to be honest, Cora, I'm confused by the scheduled C-section at 39 weeks making that decision at 31 weeks. So I do think there must have been something like a big fibroid or something that was like in the way. Like I was like, there's got to be something else besides a breech presentation at 31 weeks for sure.
Well, she kept presenting that. And I do remember at 30, well, no, at 34, 35 weeks, maybe, she still didn't turn.
Okay.
So we
So,
kind of kept it there. So at first it was kind of like, we're gonna TBA it this day, go ahead and schedule it just in case. And then it was kind of like, I'm happy I did that type thing. Uh,
yes. So when your water broke at 37 weeks, meaning your body made its own decision to go into labor and to birth your baby that day, she was still in a breech position at 37 and
yes.
2 when your water broke. So now that makes sense to me. It was like the scheduling it, like I'm like, give the baby a chance to turn. Unless, like I said, there's a septum, you have a bicornuate uterus, there's a big fibroid in the way. There's lots of reasons babies don't turn. Short umbilical cords, that type of thing. So that's got to be, this has happened to a couple of my clients over the years, but I can't imagine, I don't know where you were, but like sitting on the couch and your water breaks and you're like, no, I'm supposed to have 2 more weeks to go. So kind of where were you? What were you doing when your water broke?
I actually had a meeting that morning and I came home and I think it was 3 hours before I had to go back into the office. And it broke 3 hours before I was scheduled to go in. So,
Good. Didn't have to go back to work.
yeah. So I was rushed to the well, I wasn't rushed to the hospital. I was driven to the hospital and she's like, "Wait, aren't you scheduled?" I'm like, "Yeah." And the lady's like arguing with me in the hospital. I'm like, "Can you just take me up?" It's like my water broke. She's like, "Well, let me call your doctor." My doctor's off on Tuesday, so they get another doctor.
Oh no.
So that was fun. I did know the other doctor that would be there just in case it was on his off day. So him and his wife, they're both obese. They did the C-section and delivered my baby.
Oh, that's cute. I like it. I think it's probably like a perk of the job that people meet each other in medical school or whatever. But we have a bunch of like husband wife combos here in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I live. So, side note, my niece is in medical school also. And of course, she met her partner. And I'm like, all right, go be doctors together. Too cute, you guys. Did they do it side by side? Like one was the primary doing the cesarean and the other assisted, or was only one in?
Yes.
I really love that. That's so cute. Oh my gosh. Oh, welcome to utopia. It really is, like you said. In a sweet little town. Oh, this is so neat. Well, the question I had though was, were you having any contractions, Cora? Like, did your water break and kind of like that was it? That was the end of the drama? Or did you start cramping and contracting too before the baby was born?
So this is funny. My mom was in the triage with me, and she was like, "Are you contracting?" I said, "I don't feel anything." But they were doing the little thing, and it was saying that I was having contractions, but I didn't feel them. I just said, "I don't know if I'm excited." I said, "I really don't know what my body's doing," but I was like, "I don't feel anything."
Well, you probably were having some contractions. It sounds like, meaning like your uterus was tightening, but pounds of pressure was probably pretty low if you weren't feeling it. But people can see on the monitor, the continuous fetal monitoring and the contraction monitoring, like what baby's doing when you have a contraction and then what your belly is doing when you have a contraction. So it's easy to see from the outside, but I always say like the person who is experiencing it is the reporter at the end of the day, right? I can tell you you're having contractions all day long, but if you're not feeling them, they don't matter because they're probably not very strong, like not strong enough to like push a baby out of you. How quickly was it from the time your water broke to the time your daughter was born?
I want to say it happened around 11, and I think they did everything, and she was, I think, around 4, so that would have been like probably 4 to 5 hours
Yeah, they
time
moved
frame.
pretty quick. Yeah.
Yeah.
When you look back on that first experience, Cora, what's the first memory that comes to your mind?
It was a lot because it was my very first one, and I honestly felt like my body had failed me because I was like, "That just doesn't seem natural," because my aunt was the only one who had a C-section, and I think she only had 1, but I think that was her last one. She had 3 kids, and the last one was a C-section, and I was just kinda confused because 'cause I'm like, everybody else had vaginal, and, like, no one really I'm not really close to that aunt, so it was kinda difficult to express how I was feeling, and, like, my mom and, like, the aunts that I am close to, they're these strong, powerful women in my eyes, and I'm just like, "I got a C-section." And my mom, really couldn't relate to what I was going through emotionally and mentally because I was kinda still freaked out even though I was going through the process. But, yeah, that's how
Yeah.
I felt, and then I struggled with a little body dysmorphia throughout the whole thing. So I was like, I'm gonna have a scar. So that was like my reality. And it was all coming at full speed. Like even though I was happy and I did skin to skin contact and all that, I'm like, I'm still left with a scar. So
Our
yeah.
feelings like that are valid, and so many people can't understand. I know I just said I'm a birth doula and I've been doing this for 21 years, but I've also had other jobs. I used to work in neurosurgery in the operating room, and I was a medical device sales rep for a company and that did epilepsy surgeries. And it was so interesting how many people were not so worried about the brain surgery as they were worried about having part of their head shaved and a scar on their head. And I'm like, you're having brain surgery, but we feel different things and we attach to different things and we have different fears. And so I think that the scar, because it's a constant reminder, right? Every time you feel your body or touch your body or look in the mirror, I think that is something that a lot of people, are afraid of. And I just wanted to validate your feelings in that. One of the things that drives me crazy in this country, though, is that you're having all of these feelings going into this primary, meaning your first cesarean section, and the feelings afterwards. And it's not because your body failed you, it's because our medical system did. So, vaginal breech birth is very safe, quite safe. There's tons of clinical trials from all over the world that have proven that over and over again. The problem is lack of training. So it's not your fault or your body's fault that your medical providers hadn't been trained by their medical schools and their residencies and in their curriculum on safe vaginal breech birth. So there are organizations like Breech Without Borders. They've been on this podcast that go all over the world doing trainings with obstetricians and midwives for safe vaginal breech birth. But you were kind of a product of the system. So I hope that in this conversation, if there's one thing that you can take away from that, your body didn't fail you. Your baby was breech. That's a variation of normal in presentation. It's just that your providers were not experts in vaginal breech birth safely. And so that they felt that the safest way they could bring your baby into the world would be a cesarean section based on their training. That has nothing to do with your body or your baby or your body or your baby failing you. So I just want to hold you in that space.
Thanks.
But given where you were given birth in this cute little town and this cute little couple, it's also not their fault. You know what I mean? I'm like, it's not their fault that our medical systems, we're getting there with trainings, but 5 and 7 years ago, definitely not. Definitely not 10 or 20 years ago either. So tell me a little bit about your recovery.
Physical recovery was swift and easy because I run and I work out in the gym, so that didn't take long to do. It was going back to work, and I did have to get on antidepressants as I did develop postpartum depression because it was a lot. I wanted to work, but then I didn't know how to be mom, so I had to kind of navigate and prioritize and do all those things that weren't really I never saw being a mom in my plan, but I slowly started to embrace it in my own unique way, which brought on criticism from other people. But I handled it with grace and I got through it.
Yeah. Tell us what postpartum depression felt like. Like, how did you experience that?
Well, it started to develop because of the scar. So, and I worked in a place where I'm in front of people all the time. I'm helping them. And it was kind of like I was here. I still felt pretty. I know I was pretty, but I didn't feel it. When they were calling me, all these compliments, saying I'm this great mom, I'm a super mom, but I didn't feel like any of the things they were saying. So I had to kind of look at it from a different perspective and ask myself, why do these people see these things in me? And kind of embrace the parts of myself that they see within me that I'm not seeing. So that eventually helped. But I changed my diet. I drank more water. I changed the people I hung around, and on every doctor's visit, I probably talked to my doctor a little too much, but I told him everything that I was feeling every time he asked, every time he did an evaluation. And even if I didn't remember what to tell him, I had it written on a piece of paper.
Good for you. Yeah. I was like, writing it down is very important, especially like people get like white coat syndrome, like they have all these questions and then they see the white coat and then they're like, I forgot all my questions. I don't know why I was here. I don't know what I'm feeling. Well, it sounds like they were at least screening you for postpartum depression and anxiety and asking you all of the right questions. It presents very differently for everyone. So that's why I was asking you. I had a question about your scar. Was it a keloid or was it just a normal scar?
Just a normal scar,
Just a normal scar. And was it high, like a T shape, or was it just a horizontal scar?
just a horizontal scar
Okay. And last question, was it above or below your pubic hair?
above.
Okay. So it's very important that people hear these types of things. The scar can be low, but it could also still be above where your pubic hair is. And so like a lot of people's like strategies are like, oh, well, if they did it really low, then some of my hair could grow back and cover it up. But a scar is a constant reminder of something that your body has gone through. So yeah, so I understand when you said that you had a little body dysmorphia about those things. So I know you have also a 5-year-old. So you went on to have another cesarean section, but I kind of wanted to talk about your mental health and your journey in between those two pregnancies. So like how did you recover? How did you move on from the postpartum depression?
Well, I did the things like taking what the people were saying, seeing them within myself. I journaled here and there. I wasn't consistent, I'm not gonna lie. But changing the people I was around and being able to find my safe spaces helped before I became pregnant again.
Mhm.
But those things helped. So I was there, but then I had her. But when I had my second one, I didn't dip again, not as severe. I think it was just because I was kind of like, okay, I have to, I have, I still have a scar. But what happened with the little one, I don't know, it was different. And I really can't explain why it was different, but it was kind of like they were two peas in the pod. It was the easiest thing. My oldest was like a little helper, even though she wasn't that. But it was a different feel. I really can't explain it, but there was some type of transformation. So when I had her, I journaled and I did it twice a day. Yeah. And then when they ask me about my scar now, like if they see it, they'll say, "What's that?" And I'll explain it to them. And I'm not sad anymore. And they go, "Oh, I have a powerful mom. Like, you're so strong." And it makes me feel good about myself, even though I do tear up a little bit, but it makes me happy because now it's okay. But when I tell them about it, I tell them from a place of strength because not everybody wants to have a C-section. Not everybody is okay after the fact, but I try to explain to them that the things that I do in the maternal health arena is so they don't have to go through what I went through.
Oh, I love that. Changing the future too. And also,
Mhm.
like, I don't know if you've read the book, The Body Keeps the Score, but just healing, like, from a cellular level, like healing things that are going on in your body so that you can move forward. Cor, did you ever take a medication or did you mostly heal through the ways that you said running, working out, listening to others, journaling? I just didn't know if you used a medication like it for
With the
depression.
oldest, I did, but only for 3 months.
See, that's great. Sometimes we only need a little as our hormones stabilize too. We just need some help for a little bit. Some people don't need medication and some people do. So it's important on this podcast that I let people know too. Like we don't have to suffer. There are so many ways, like you heard Cora say, like from moving her body to talking to people to journaling and also taking a medicine. There's lots of things that we can do to start to feel better. So when you were looking at your second pregnancy, and was it ever on the table, like to have a vaginal birth after a cesarean section? Or did you know you were going to schedule a secondary cesarean section?
Well, I talked to my doctor, and I will admit, if the resources that were available now, I probably would have tried vaginal. But he was like, "It's a 50-50 chance," and just that 50-50, I'm gonna be honest with you, scared me.
Yeah.
So, I felt the C-section was the safer route, so I just went with that. But, again, had the resources now been available then, I probably would have did vaginal. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we can't really go backwards, right? We have to stay in the present moment and we have to look forward to the future too. Cora, honestly, this is why I do what I do. I have an online course called Birth Story Academy, and one of my classes is on cesarean sections. One of my classes is on inductions of labor. One of my classes is on spontaneous labor. So it's like I'm trying to reach as many people as possible, because if I'm able to reach someone like you, Cora, in Alabama, I think that I have the opportunity to empower people to try a vaginal birth after a cesarean or try a vaginal birth after two cesarean sections, if that's what they have on their heart. Not everybody has it on their heart to try, but if they have it on their heart to try, then I really like to help teach them how to do that. So I think you made the best decision that you could at the time with a provider that you trusted and the resources that you had available to you. So now you told me that you went into labor again at 37 weeks, 2 days. So the average gestation is 41 weeks, 1 day. For the second 40 weeks, 4 or 5 days. So this is quite early. It's like, I mean, it's full term, full gestation. But how did you go into labor? I know you had this scheduled C-section, again, 39 weeks, but how did you go into labor this time? Did you start having contractions? Did your water break? Like, what was this story?
Okay, this one's more comical in a way.
Okay.
So I was at work and I had, I think, I had one employee with me. And I told her, I said, I think I'm contracting. So I had her time them. They weren't that close. I was like, okay, maybe I can work. So then the store opened and I'm in the office. And I think I had 3 employees by 10 o'clock. So I didn't realize we were going to be busy that day. And my youngest was born on April 23rd. There's no holidays around that day. So I'm like, it's not gonna, and it was a Tuesday. It was a Tuesday. So I'm sitting in a chair and I'm ringing people out and I can't. So I take I told my employee to go to Chick-fil-A because Chick-fil-A is like right there. And I told her to get me a cup of ice. I hadn't eaten anything the entire day. So I was like, just in case, I don't want to eat anything and be, on the operating table.
Yeah.
So I'm calling like everybody. I'm like, hey, I'm contracting. I'm like, once they get close, I'm like, I have to leave. And I'm like, I don't want to get fired at all. So, and they all live probably 45 minutes away. And I'm like, Mom, I'm like, because my mom, I think she was the closest. So I'm like telling her, like, just come get me. Like, I'm just gonna walk out. But
Just
eventually, I think,
FYI, Cora, you can't get fired for going into labor. I mean, they could try, and then they'd have to give you a
yeah.
lot of money in a lawsuit.
So eventually, I want to say 45 minutes after this call, I went to the doctor just to make sure because he's like, just come in, let me check. I was dilated already. And then we went in, and I think as they were doing everything in the triage, my
Hmm.
water did break when they were doing all the IVs and everything.
Wow. So they were getting you prepped for your
Yeah.
surgery, and then your water breaks again on its own. I mean, your body has an agenda. Now, was this baby head down?
Yes, she was
Okay.
head down.
Okay. So that head down on that cervix applies a lot of pressure and helps the cervix to thin and dilate too a little bit sooner. So I bet it ramped up a little bit after your water broke.
Yeah, I got stuck with that epidural needle, I want to say 2 or 3 times. It didn't take and I had to have a spinal while I was on the table.
Ooh, yeah. Well, an epidural is kind of, I would say, maybe a little bit lighter. A spinal makes your legs go totally numb, but in a, maybe in a good way. So, how did you do with the anesthesia? Like, did you get nauseous or sick? Did you feel fine when they laid you back on the OR table?
Well, when we did skin to skin, I got the shakes. I think that's what they're called, or
Mm-hmm.
chills.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was scary. I'm not gonna lie.
Do you remember that from your first birth?
I did not get that the first time. I got it the second time and I was like freaking out, but the nurse that was there, she did calm me down. So I was like, oh my God.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you didn't have it on your first. I call them like the labor shakes or the post birth shakes. And it's typically like when the placenta leaves the body, there's just a big hormone shift and your body can shake. And some people don't necessarily feel cold. Like everybody's like, "Can I get you a warm blanket? Can I get you a warm blanket?" And the person's like, "I'm not cold. I just can't stop shaking, you know?" And usually, if it starts, it'll last about 30 minutes. But it can be confusing and uncomfortable, and you just want it to go away because your baby's on your chest and you just want to bond with your baby. But it is quite normal, Cora, even though it is uncomfortable. So they eventually go away. You're not currently shaking 5 years later. So we promise you guys, they do end, they do stop. So. Um,
Yes.
so it sounds like you handled anesthesia quite well. You handled the actual operation of doing a cesarean section quite well. And then it sounds like your hospital helped prioritize skin to skin for you, also for your babies.
Yes. We live in a little utopia.
Yeah. I was like, all of that sounds wonderful. But I think that the story that you're getting at is that it feels like maybe you lost something, or you lost an experience and then you gained a scar. Everyone who experiences a cesarean section, whether it's a choice or it's something that they end in urgently or emergently, each person has their own story and their own feelings to tell about that. So, how did your recovery go after your second cesarean section?
So I went back to eating healthier. I think I cut out red meat, which was one thing, because I was sleeping too much, but my daughter sleeps a lot too, so maybe it was because of her. So I drank more water, became more active. I was outside more often, and I did more things with them. And I started to ask for more time off, which was a biggie. So I never did that before. Before I even had kids, I was work, 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 work. I didn't mind overtime. So I said with the second one, I'm gonna just try to do this. And so I started cutting back time. I asked for more time off. I even asked for, 2 weekends off. But I started actually getting those things and I started speaking up more. I'm like, I have 2 daughters. It's like I want to show them, you can be a powerful lady. It's fine. Be bold, be gracious. So like they're looking at me. I'm mom. So I wanted to show them that you can have both. You can have both.
You can have both, and you did both. And I think that's amazing. So, one of the reasons that Cora, you wrote in was to talk to us about right to heal. And I know that you kind of alluded to that after your primary cesarean section, and that you had taken medicine. But on the second, you didn't end up with that severe postpartum depression and didn't end up taking medicine. And so, why don't you talk to us about your program and your coaching program, Right to Heal, which I know is a mindfulness based coaching program. And I love that it's focused on cesarean moms. This is incredible what you're doing. So I want to dig right into that. I want to know what you're doing and how I can send some of my doula clients to you and those that are listening to the podcast that have had cesarean sections that are looking to heal.
Okay, so first, I before I even meet with anybody, I get them to write, and I have like a whole prompt thing and prompts that they can just think about while they're writing. The whole point is to name the emotion that we're feeling. And I'm not saying name it anger or guilt or being ashamed, but like really pulling out your thesaurus and like really looking at different words to kind of name what it is and then kind of not retell the story, but tell it from a different perspective. Kinda like how I talked about my scar now to my girls in a different way than I would when they were first born. Kinda giving it an empowerment statement, so empowering the scar in a way and motivating us to no longer let our emotions block us from a abundant future, because our emotions can hold us back from jobs, from falling in love again, from traveling the world because we're so bogged down constantly rewinding the tape in our head of, the experience we had in the room or the emergency C-section or even the recovery process that we don't often talk about.
And I think that your coaching program is very like niche focused on cesareans. But I think that if somebody were to come to your program who had any prior traumas about other things, it sounds like some of the same principles could be applied to other
Mhm.
other traumas or future traumas that they may, or not even a trauma, but a past hardship or a future hardship for reframing. So it's called Right to Heal. And this is Cora Howard. And so, Cora, what is the best way for people to get a hold of you and to learn more about Right to Heal?
They can connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram, and I'm on Threads a lot, so they can contact me there too.
Amazing. And I have linked all of Cora's links in the show notes. So wherever you're listening to this podcast, you can just click down below to the show notes and then everything is linked for you. So it makes it really easy for you to get a hold of Cora. So, Cora, you also told me about your favorite baby product, and I love sharing with the audience what other moms are using or what kind of saved you. So, can you talk to us about the Harbor Baby Monitor?
So it's a newish baby monitor and it's not as advanced in a way. And you can also, if you have trouble with your baby sleeping, they have night nannies to kind of help you with that. And they also have it to where you can sleep peacefully at night. And if there is, some type of where the baby's coughing or there's something going on, they can alert you so you're not having to constantly be paranoid watching the camera or watching, the baby's temperature or like their movements and things like that. So I know I have a couple of friends who that was one of their things. They were constantly watching, the heart rate and like all those different things. But then you have a nurse that's sitting there watching and helping you out. So I think that's a really cool thing that comes along with that particular device.
Very cool. I'm also going to link that in the show notes, you guys, because I had actually never heard of the Harbor Baby Monitor until today. So, three things that we promised in the intro that we were going to share and that are part of the Right to Heal program are best tips for C section recovery, emotional resilience for moms, and postpartum mindfulness practices. So, before we close this episode, you guys, I just am going to have Cora go through if you could give one tip for each of those categories. So, for the first one, what's your best tip for C section recovery?
Is to give yourself grace, because it is hard recovering and it does hurt, but give yourself grace
Hmm.
and ask for help.
Okay. And then
Yeah.
there may not be like a tag for emotional resilience for moms, but what is like a word of encouragement or something that you find yourself often doing in your coaching practice that moves moms towards emotional resilience?
Is to reframe how they're thinking, but to ask someone who they trust to kind of help them through that process. So someone that you know that will listen and give sound advice and will give you wisdom to kind of help you reframe it. Someone who's non-judgmental and I would say also non-biased.
Okay. Thank you for that. And then postpartum mindfulness practices. So, can you give us an example or something that listeners could do from home today? Maybe there's somebody listening that recently had a cesarean section, they're immediate postpartum, and they're looking for a way to practice mindfulness. What would you say to them today?
So, the number one thing that I would say is to do something creative. That is like my go-to. That is the one thing that we also work through. So we will come up with your what creative activity would help with any coping mechanism or when you're triggered to help get you back to a state of being open and curious and interested. Like that's my go-to thing. Get creative.
Beautiful. And I'm going to touch on one thing that you said earlier that I think gets overlooked a lot. You did say that you got outside a lot more and got more sunshine. And I really do just think this earth and nature can be so healing. So I do encourage people to try to get out and get in this, let that sunshine on your face and just kind of feel the breeze and nature. I think that's something that we stay locked up in our houses a lot after we have babies. And I'm like, just go sit on your back porch and have some fresh air. So, Cora Howard, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for introducing us to Right to Heal and sharing your cesarean section stories. I know that there's a lot of people that learned from you today, and it takes a lot to be vulnerable and to share your story, but to also move forward and to make something very beautiful and positive for both your girls and for those that follow behind you with their cesarean sections and need help. So, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Birth Story. My goal is you will walk away from each episode with a clear picture of how labor and delivery might go, and that you will feel empowered by the end of your pregnancy to speak up, plan, and prepare for the birth you want, no matter what that looks like.